Sometimes the most expensive betrayal isn't the affair itself. It's the life you built around a lie. The crystal chandeliers above Naomi Carter's dining room scattered gold across the marble table like fragments of a dream that was already dying. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Whitmore estate, Manhattan shimmered beneath the November rain, cold silver lights stretching endlessly into the dark like a city too busy to notice a woman's heart quietly breaking inside a $100 million mansion. Naomi adjusted the sleeve of her black silk gown with controlled elegance, her reflection flickering in the antique mirror beside the fireplace. At 33, she had mastered the art of composure, the art of smiling at charity galas while tabloids speculated about her billionaire husband's distance, the art of pretending not to notice how Ethan Whitmore no longer kissed her goodbye before early board meetings. Tonight marked 12 years of marriage. 12 years since a young black interior designer from Brooklyn had fallen in love with the ambitious white real estate investor who promised her they would build an empire together. And for a while, they had. The mansion itself had once been proof of that love. Every staircase curve, every imported Italian chandelier, every carefully chosen piece of art carried Naomi's fingerprints. She had designed the estate room by room, while Ethan built Whitmore Global into one of the most powerful development companies on the East Coast. Back then, he used to stand behind her while she worked, his arms loosely wrapped around her waist, whispering, "One day this house will hold every memory we ever make." Now the silence inside it felt enormous. A soft jazz record played somewhere in the background while candlelight trembled against untouched crystal glasses. The chef had prepared Ethan's favorite dinner exactly the way Naomi requested. Truffle risotto, dry-aged filet, the same bottle of Bordeaux they shared the night he proposed in Paris. Everything waited beneath the warm amber glow of the dining room, as though love itself might still walk through the door if she prepared carefully enough. Naomi glanced at the grandfather clock near the staircase. 9:47 p.m., 3 hours late. Her phone remained silent beside her champagne glass. No apology, no explanation, just absence. She inhaled slowly and reached for the small velvet box hidden beside her plate. Inside rested a platinum watch engraved with the words, "To the man who built a life with me. Forever, Naomi." The word forever suddenly felt embarrassingly fragile. Thunder rolled softly beyond the windows. Then her phone vibrated. Naomi's lips almost curved with relief as she reached for it, expecting Ethan's name to appear across the screen. But it wasn't Ethan. It was a notification from a celebrity gossip account she barely followed anymore. Her fingers froze. The headline appeared before the image fully loaded. Billionaire CEO Ethan Whitmore secretly marries socialite Victoria Hale in private Italian ceremony. The world went silent. Naomi stared at the photograph as if her mind refused to understand what her eyes already knew. Ethan stood beneath golden cathedral lights in Florence wearing the same custom tuxedo she had helped tailor for their anniversary gala last spring. Beside him, Victoria Hale smiled beneath a lace veil, her hand resting possessively against Ethan's chest while guests applauded around them. Married. Secretly married. Naomi didn't cry. Not yet. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers first. Crystal shattered violently against the marble floor, the sharp sound echoing through the mansion like a gunshot through a cathedral. And somewhere deep inside Naomi Carter, something far more valuable shattered with it. The rain continued long after midnight, sliding slowly down the towering glass windows of the Whitmore estate, like tears the mansion itself refused to shed. Naomi Carter remained standing beside the shattered champagne glass, her breathing calm in a way that frightened even her. The photograph on her phone still glowed against the darkness of the dining room table. Ethan in Florence, Victoria in white lace, smiling beneath cathedral light while their anniversary candles burned untouched 6,000 miles away. Somewhere in the house, the jazz record ended with a soft crackle before silence swallowed everything whole. Naomi finally bent down and picked up the broken crystal one piece at a time. Her movements were precise, controlled, elegant, the same way she handled every disaster in her life. A cut appeared across the side of her finger, thin and red beneath the chandelier glow, but she barely noticed. Pain had a strange way of becoming distant when humiliation arrived first. She walked slowly through the mansion afterward, not like a wife searching for answers, but like a stranger touring a museum filled with stolen memories. Every room suddenly looked different. The grand staircase where Ethan once carried her after charity galas now felt like part of an expensive stage set. The piano near the fireplace where he used to play old jazz standards on sleepless nights now looked untouched, cold beneath layers of polished black lacquer. Even the air inside the mansion felt dishonest. 12 years. Naomi tried to understand when the lie had begun. Perhaps it started the first time Ethan missed their anniversary dinner because of a business emergency in Los Angeles. Or maybe it was the winter he stopped reaching for her hand during public events. The signs had always existed. Small absences, quiet distances, love fading in invisible ways until one day betrayal no longer needed hiding. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floors as she entered Ethan's private office on the second floor. The room smelled faintly of cedarwood and expensive cologne. Manhattan glittered outside the massive windows behind his desk, while rows of architecture awards reflected silver beneath recessed lighting. Naomi's eyes drifted toward the framed photograph sitting near the bookshelf. It had been taken 13 years earlier on a rooftop in Brooklyn before the billions, before the magazines, before the private jets and luxury estates. Ethan stood behind her in a charcoal coat, his arms wrapped tightly around her shoulders while she laughed directly into the camera. They looked exhausted back then. Broke. Hopeful. Real. Naomi picked up the frame carefully. For a moment, her expression softened. Then she noticed something else beside it. A receipt. Florence, Italy. Hotel Belladonna Suites. 2 guests. 7 nights. Dated 3 months earlier. Her stomach tightened, but still she did not cry. Instead, she sat down slowly in Ethan's leather chair and stared at the city skyline beyond the glass. Somewhere below, New York continued moving exactly as it always had. Yellow taxis, midnight sirens, restaurants glowing warm against wet sidewalks. Millions of people falling in love, while others quietly discovered they never truly had been. Naomi removed her wedding ring carefully and placed it beside the photograph. The diamond caught the office light one last time before becoming just another object. Another expensive thing attached to a dead promise. Then her phone vibrated again. This time it was not gossip media. It was Victoria Hale herself. A photograph appeared first. Victoria standing inside a luxury bridal suite, one manicured hand resting against Ethan's chest while a massive diamond ring sparkled beneath candlelight. Beneath the image were only 6 words. He chose me. You should let go. Naomi stared at the message for several silent seconds. Then, for the first time that night, she smiled. Not because her heart did not ache. It did, deeply, but because something inside her had suddenly become very still, very clear. Victoria thought this was about love. Ethan probably thought it was about guilt. But Naomi understood something neither of them did yet. The mansion, the accounts, the legacy, the empire itself. Legally, almost all of it belonged to her. By sunrise, the Whitmore estate no longer felt like a home. It felt like evidence. Pale morning light spilled across the marble floors while Naomi Carter stood alone in the kitchen wearing a cream cashmere robe, her untouched coffee growing cold beside the window. The city outside looked washed in silver beneath low winter clouds, elegant and indifferent at the same time. For years, Naomi had believed wealth protected people from humiliation. Now she understood the opposite was often true. Rich people simply suffered in larger rooms with better lighting. Her phone had not stopped vibrating since dawn. Gossip blogs, society pages, private messages from women pretending to offer sympathy while searching for details. The headline spread quickly through Manhattan's social circles. Billionaire CEO marries socialite in secret European ceremony. The photographs were everywhere now. Ethan smiling beside Victoria beneath cathedral arches. Victoria holding a bouquet of white roses that Naomi herself had once loved. Every image felt strangely calculated, as though someone wanted the humiliation to travel as far and as fast as possible. Naomi ignored all of it. Instead, she opened the hidden drawer beneath the kitchen island and removed a slim black folder she had not touched in years. Whitmore Estate ownership documents. Her name appeared across nearly every major asset tied to the mansion. Naomi Carter Whitmore. Sole trustee. Sole property holder. She remembered exactly why Ethan had insisted on it years ago. It protects us from corporate liability. he had explained during construction. No one comes after family assets if they are legally under your trust. Back then, Naomi thought it was love. Now she realized it had simply been strategy. Ironically, the strategy had become her shield. The front doors opened suddenly downstairs. Heavy footsteps echoed across marble. Ethan. Naomi did not move immediately. She heard his suitcase wheels drag through the grand foyer. Heard the pause that followed, long enough for him to notice the cold candles still sitting untouched in the dining room. Long enough to see the shattered crystal had already been cleaned away. Then his voice came low and cautious from the entrance hall. Naomi. She closed the folder carefully before walking toward the staircase with measured calm. Ethan Whitmore stood beneath the massive chandelier, wearing a charcoal overcoat dusted with rain. He looked exhausted. His dark blonde hair was slightly disheveled, his jaw tense beneath the weight of sleeplessness and public scandal. For a brief second, his eyes softened with relief at the sight of her. Naomi, I can explain. She descended the staircase slowly, one hand brushing lightly against the black iron railing. Every movement controlled. Elegant. Untouchable. Ethan stepped closer. What happened in Italy was complicated. Naomi almost smiled at the absurdity of the sentence. Complicated. As though secret marriages happened accidentally between business meetings and private flights. Her gaze drifted toward the wedding band still on his finger. The same hand that once held hers while promising forever beside the Brooklyn Bridge at midnight. How long? She asked quietly. Ethan inhaled sharply. It was not supposed to happen like this. That is not what I asked. The silence stretched painfully between them. Rain tapped softly against the towering windows, while somewhere above them, the second-floor piano room remained dark and still. Ethan finally looked away first. 3 years. Naomi nodded once. No tears. No screaming. Just confirmation. 3 years of lies hidden inside 12 years of marriage. 3 years of business trips, late meetings, charity appearances, and carefully rehearsed affection. Ethan reached toward her carefully, as though approaching something fragile. Naomi, listen to me. Victoria does not mean what you think she means. That finally made her laugh softly. Not with humor. With disbelief. You flew across the Atlantic Ocean to marry her beneath cathedral light, she said calmly. I think that means exactly what it looks like. Ethan's expression darkened with frustration. This is bigger than feelings. There are investors involved. Public image. Family pressure. You do not understand how complicated my world has become. Naomi stared at him for several long seconds before answering. No, Ethan. I understand perfectly now. Then her eyes drifted upward toward the chandelier, hanging above them like frozen gold. You built your empire so carefully that you forgot who built the home underneath it. And for the first time since Ethan Whitmore entered the mansion that morning, he looked afraid. The mansion grew quieter over the next 48 hours. But it was not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the kind that settles over places moments before collapse. Naomi Carter moved through the estate like a woman attending the funeral of a life she no longer recognized. Outside, Manhattan entered December beneath pale gray skies and freezing rain, while reporters gathered beyond the iron gates hoping for photographs of America's newest billionaire scandal. Inside, the warmth had vanished from the Whitmore home completely. Ethan spent most of his time locked inside his office downstairs taking endless calls from investors, attorneys, and publicists trying to contain the damage spreading through financial media. Naomi heard fragments whenever she passed the corridor. Temporary narrative control. Shareholder confidence. Public perception. Not once did she hear the word marriage. Not once did she hear love. On the third morning after Ethan returned from Italy, Naomi entered the breakfast room, wearing a fitted ivory sweater and tailored black trousers, her dark curls pulled neatly over one shoulder. Sunlight spilled softly across the table, illuminating untouched pastries and silver coffee service prepared by staff who avoided eye contact now, uncertain which version of their employers still existed. Ethan looked up from his phone the moment she entered. His face appeared sharper than usual, exhaustion hollowing the space beneath his eyes. We need to make a statement, he said immediately. Naomi poured coffee into her cup without responding. The board thinks it is best if we present this as a misunderstanding before the market opens Monday. She stirred cream slowly into the dark liquid. A misunderstanding. Ethan leaned forward. Naomi, listen to me carefully. If this turns into a public divorce war, It damages everyone, including you. That made her pause, not because she felt threatened, because she realized Ethan still believed she was thinking emotionally while he alone remained strategic. He still underestimated her. Naomi lifted the porcelain cup carefully. "Do you know what the saddest part of all this is?" she asked quietly. Ethan exhaled impatiently. "Please do not do this. You still think this conversation is about protecting money." The silence tightened between them. Somewhere deeper inside the estate, staff quietly prepared rooms for Victoria Hale's arrival later that afternoon. Naomi had overheard the conversation the previous evening. Ethan never told her directly. Perhaps cowardice had finally replaced arrogance. Ethan rubbed a hand across his jaw before lowering his voice. "Victoria's staying here is temporary." Naomi almost admired the audacity of the sentence. Almost. Temporary, she repeated softly while looking out toward the snow beginning to fall beyond the windows. "Like your loyalty." Ethan's expression hardened. "I am trying to fix this." "No," Naomi replied calmly. "You are trying to survive it." That landed harder than shouting ever could have. Ethan stood abruptly from the table, frustration flickering beneath his carefully controlled exterior. "You think this is easy for me?" he asked. "Everything I built is under attack right now." Naomi finally looked directly at him then. Really looked at him. The expensive watch. The tailored navy cashmere coat hanging beside the doorway. The billionaire who once promised her peace while slowly replacing it with performance. "That is the difference between us, Ethan," she said quietly. "When I loved you, I built a home. When you loved yourself, you built an empire." His jaw tightened, but before he could answer, the sound of tires crunching against snow echoed from the circular driveway outside. Naomi turned toward the windows. A sleek white Bentley slowly approached the front entrance beneath falling snowflakes. Victoria Hale stepped out moments later wrapped in an oversized cream fur coat, diamond earrings catching the winter light, while photographers exploded behind the security gates beyond the property. Naomi watched silently as Victoria smiled toward the cameras before glancing up at the mansion with visible satisfaction, like a woman arriving to claim a trophy she believed she had earned. Ethan moved instinctively toward the front hall. Naomi remained perfectly still beside the breakfast table. Then she reached calmly into her pocket and pressed send on a text message she had prepared an hour earlier. 3 simple words to a private forensic attorney in Manhattan. "Begin the transfer process." Upstairs, hidden inside a locked drawer in Naomi's dressing room, sat the original ownership files to the Whitmore estate. And downstairs, walking confidently through the front doors beneath crystal chandeliers, Victoria Hale still had absolutely no idea the mansion no longer belonged to Ethan Whitmore at all. Snow covered Manhattan in quiet white layers the morning the Whitmore estate stopped belonging to the Whitmores. Naomi Carter stood inside the glass sunroom overlooking the frozen garden courtyard, her fingers resting lightly around a porcelain espresso cup, while the city disappeared beneath drifting winter fog beyond the property gates. The mansion felt different now, lighter somehow, as though the walls themselves had finally grown tired of protecting lies. Upstairs, Victoria Hale spent the morning redecorating Ethan's bedroom suite, as if replacing Naomi's photographs with fashion magazines and white orchids could erase 12 years of another woman's existence. Staff moved silently through the hallways carrying garment bags, floral arrangements, and expensive luggage while pretending not to notice the humiliation unfolding inside one of Manhattan's most photographed homes. Naomi noticed everything. The whispers, the pity, the discomfort in the eyes of longtime employees who had watched her build this estate from architectural sketches and unfinished concrete. Yet none of it touched her anymore. Grief had slowly transformed into clarity, and clarity was dangerous. Around 11:30, Naomi's private attorney arrived through the side entrance carrying a slim leather portfolio beneath his coat. Daniel Reeves had represented old money families in Manhattan for over 20 years, and even he seemed stunned by the legal position Naomi quietly held. They met inside the estate library surrounded by towering walnut bookshelves and soft amber lighting while snow tapped gently against the windows. "The transfer can be finalized today," Daniel said carefully as he spread documents across the antique desk. "But once this goes through, there is no reversing it." Naomi glanced toward the fireplace, where flames flickered softly against polished marble. "That house stopped being a home long before today," she answered. Daniel studied her for a moment with visible respect. You are handling this better than most people would. Naomi almost smiled. No, she said quietly. I am handling it differently. By early afternoon, contracts had already moved through private financial channels faster than gossip ever could. The buyer was an international hospitality group based in Dubai looking to acquire landmark luxury properties across New York. Cash offer. Immediate transfer. Complete discretion. The number attached to the agreement was staggering even by billionaire standards. $100 million. Naomi signed the final page without hesitation. The gold fountain pen moved steadily between her fingers while sunlight spilled softly across the desk. No trembling hands. No tears. Just the quiet sound of a woman reclaiming ownership of her own life. Upstairs, laughter suddenly echoed from the second-floor balcony. Victoria. Naomi looked upward briefly before returning the signed documents to Daniel. How long before the new owners take possession? She asked. Immediately, he replied. The estate legally changes hands at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Naomi nodded once. Perfect. At exactly 3:58, a black Rolls-Royce pulled into the circular driveway outside the mansion gates. Ethan Whitmore stepped out moments later after spending the day downtown fighting reporters and shareholders in emergency meetings. Snowflakes melted against the shoulders of his dark wool coat, while frustration radiated from every sharp movement in his body. He entered the mansion, already speaking into his phone. I do not care what the media is saying. Stabilize the stock before tomorrow morning. Then he stopped. The grand foyer looked completely different. Staff members carried boxes through the marble hallway. Art handlers carefully removed massive paintings from the walls. Two movers rolled a covered piano toward the front entrance while unfamiliar men in tailored gray suits examined architectural blueprints near the staircase. Ethan lowered his phone slowly. What the hell is going on? No one answered immediately. Finally, Daniel Reeves stepped calmly into the foyer, holding a leather document case beneath one arm. Good afternoon, Mr. Whitmore. Ethan's expression darkened instantly. Why are you here? Before Daniel could respond, another man approached from the dining room. Tall, Middle Eastern, impeccably dressed in a charcoal cashmere overcoat. He extended his hand politely. Adrian Ramon. He introduced himself smoothly. Pleasure meeting you. My company finalized acquisition of the estate this afternoon. Ethan stared at him in confusion. Acquisition? Adrian nodded politely. From your wife. Silence hit the mansion like a collapsing cathedral. Upstairs, Victoria suddenly appeared at the balcony railing in silk loungewear, confusion spreading across her face as movers carried Naomi's grand piano through the foyer beneath her. Ethan turned slowly toward the staircase where Naomi now stood above them, all dressed in a fitted black coat, one leather glove resting lightly against the railing. Snowlight poured through the towering windows behind her, outlining her silhouette in silver and gold. Calm, elegant, untouchable. Ethan looked at her as though seeing her clearly for the first time in years. You sold the house. Naomi met his eyes without anger, without hesitation. No, Ethan, she said softly. I sold the illusion that it ever belonged to you. The story exploded across Manhattan before sunset. By 6 o'clock, every financial news network, celebrity blog, and luxury real estate account carried some version of the same headline. Billionaire CEO loses $100 million estate after secret marriage scandal. Photographs of moving trucks outside the former Whitmore mansion spread across social media, beside grainy images of Ethan Whitmore standing frozen beneath crystal chandeliers, while strangers carried pieces of his carefully constructed world out the front doors. But the image people could not stop talking about was Naomi Carter descending the staircase in black cashmere with the calm expression of a woman who had already survived the worst thing that could happen to her. 3 months later, Manhattan looked different beneath spring light. The brutal winter had melted into soft April rain and blooming white cherry trees lining the streets near Central Park. Yet nowhere had transformed more completely than Naomi herself. The woman who once quietly hosted charity dinners beside her billionaire husband had become something far more dangerous after disappearing from public life. Mystery, power, reinvention. Naomi Carter no longer attended events as Ethan Whitmore's wife. She arrived as the founder and creative director of Carter Noir Living, a luxury interior and architectural brand that transformed historic Manhattan properties into modern masterpieces for elite clients around the world. The launch had stunned the design industry almost overnight. Investors praised her vision. Fashion magazines praised her elegance. Women online praised something else entirely: the way she walked away without begging to be chosen. On a rainy Thursday evening in April, black SUVs lined the entrance of the Manhattan Luxury Summit at the historic Astoria Grand Hotel, while photographers crowded beneath velvet ropes, hoping to capture billionaires, celebrities, and old money royalty arriving beneath the gold marquee lights. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers illuminated marble columns and towering floral arrangements, while string music floated softly through the air like expensive perfume. Ethan Whitmore stood near the back of the ballroom in a tailored midnight blue tuxedo, staring absently into a glass of bourbon he had barely touched. He looked thinner now, sharper. The kind of exhaustion no amount of money could disguise lingered behind his eyes. Since the mansion sale, Whitmore Global had suffered major investor losses, and public trust continued slipping week after week. Victoria Hale remained by his side publicly, but Manhattan had already begun whispering about cracks in the glamorous new marriage. Some people noticed how often she attended events alone now. Others noticed Ethan barely looked at her anymore. Then suddenly the ballroom shifted. Not loudly, elegantly, like a change in gravity itself. Heads turned toward the entrance, almost in unison. Conversations softened. Camera flashes erupted across the marble lobby beyond the ballroom doors. Naomi Carter entered wearing a floor-length crimson gown that moved like liquid silk beneath the chandelier light. Black diamonds rested against the deep brown glow of her skin, while her curls framed her face with effortless sophistication. She did not rush. She did not perform. She simply walked forward with the quiet confidence of a woman who no longer needed anyone's approval to feel valuable. Ethan's glass nearly slipped from his hand. For one suspended moment, the ballroom disappeared around him completely. All he could see was her. Naomi paused briefly near the staircase while reporters called her name from every direction. "Miss Carter, over here." "Naomi, how does it feel becoming the most talked-about woman in Manhattan? Is Carter Noir Living planning international expansion?" She smiled politely, but answered none of them. Silence had become her sharpest form of power. Across the ballroom, Victoria's expression tightened as she watched powerful investors immediately leave her side to greet Naomi instead. Men who once ignored Naomi as merely Ethan Whitmore's elegant wife now competed for introductions. Women who once pitted her now admired her openly. Ethan remained frozen near the bar while Naomi finally stepped into the center of the ballroom beneath cascading gold light. Their eyes met across the crowded room. 12 years of memories lived inside that silence. Brooklyn rooftops, late-night dreams, Paris promises, marble floors covered in shattered crystal. Ethan suddenly understood something devastating then. Naomi had not destroyed his world. She had simply stopped shrinking herself to survive inside it. And somehow that loss felt larger than the mansion ever had. By early summer, the marriage Ethan Whitmore once risked everything to protect had already begun collapsing beneath the weight of its own emptiness. Manhattan society noticed it first in small ways. Victoria Hale arriving alone at charity luncheons she once insisted Ethan attend beside her. Rumors of arguments overheard inside private restaurants overlooking the Hudson. The sudden disappearance of coordinated magazine interviews meant to rebrand them as the city's newest power couple. Wealth could purchase publicity. It could not manufacture peace. Ethan felt it everywhere now, in the cold silence of penthouse mornings. In the expensive hotel suites Victoria preferred over apartments because she believed permanence was beneath her. In the way conversations between them sounded more like negotiations than affection. The illusion had cracked, and once illusions cracked in Manhattan, they rarely survived long. One humid June evening, Ethan returned to the temporary Tribeca penthouse he now rented overlooking the river after a brutal 14-hour day battling investors and legal advisors. Rain clouds pressed low against the skyline, while distant thunder rolled above the city. Inside the apartment, Victoria sat at the marble kitchen island scrolling through social media in a silk cream dress, surrounded by shopping bags from Madison Avenue boutiques. She barely looked up when he entered. "Your publicist called," she said casually. Apparently your stock dropped another 6% today. Ethan loosened his tie slowly, exhaustion darkening every movement. I know. Victoria finally lifted her eyes from her phone. You should stop fighting Naomi publicly. It is making us both look desperate. The sentence landed strangely. Not because it was cruel, because it sounded calculated. Clinical. Ethan poured himself a drink without answering. Victoria stood and walked toward him in slow measured heels. You know what people are saying now? She asked softly. They think she won. Ethan's jaw tightened immediately. This is not a competition. Victoria laughed quietly. Everything is a competition in this city. Her fingers traced the rim of his glass before she added, You should have seen the women at lunch today. They worship her now. Naomi Carter this. Carter and we're living that. Honestly, it is exhausting. Ethan stared at the rain sliding down the penthouse windows. Somewhere deep beneath the frustration and humiliation, something else had begun growing over the past months. Regret. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind that arrived in ordinary moments. Passing a jazz club Naomi once loved. Seeing a woman in a crimson dress crossing Park Avenue. Hearing old Frank Sinatra records inside black car services late at night. Small reminders that the woman he betrayed had once been the safest part of his life. Victoria stepped closer behind him. You cannot keep looking at her like that every time she enters a room, she said quietly. Ethan turned slowly. Like what? Like you lost something irreplaceable. Silence spread between them. Victoria folded her arms. Tell me the truth for once, Ethan. If Naomi called tomorrow and asked you to come back, would you? He opened his mouth immediately, then stopped. And in that hesitation, Victoria finally received the answer she feared most. Her expression hardened beneath the soft penthouse lighting. Unbelievable, she whispered. Ethan looked away first. That night, long after Victoria disappeared into the bedroom suite in cold silence, Ethan remained alone near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lower Manhattan. Rain painted silver streaks against the glass while the city glowed beneath him like a kingdom built entirely from ambition and loneliness. His phone rested untouched beside the bourbon glass in his hand. Across the screen was a photograph from 13 years earlier. Naomi had once texted him during the early days of Whitmore Global. They stood inside an unfinished Brooklyn warehouse covered in dust and architectural plans, smiling beside folding tables and cheap takeout coffee. Before investors, before tabloids, before greed disguised itself as success. Ethan stared at Naomi's face in the photograph for a long time. Then another memory surfaced unexpectedly. The night he bought her first designer gown after Whitmore Global landed its breakthrough contract. Naomi had stood in front of the mirror, quietly smoothing the fabric before whispering, "Promise me we never become people who value appearances more than peace." Back then, he kissed her forehead and said they never would. Ethan closed his eyes slowly as thunder rolled over Manhattan once more. Somewhere between becoming powerful and becoming admired, he had lost the woman who once made success feel meaningful instead of empty. And for the first time in years, Ethan Whitmore understood something terrifying. Naomi had not taken revenge on him. She had simply learned how to live beautifully without him. September arrived wrapped in golden light and cool evening air, turning Manhattan into a city that looked almost gentle from a distance. The rooftop gala at the Aurora Tower Hotel glittered above Fifth Avenue like a private constellation reserved for people wealthy enough to mistake luxury for immortality. Crystal candle lanterns flickered beside rooftop gardens while a live jazz trio played softly beneath the stars. New York's elite moved through the evening wrapped in couture gowns, black tuxedos, and carefully rehearsed confidence. But despite the billionaires, politicians, and celebrities surrounding the rooftop ballroom that night, everyone seemed aware of only two people in the room. Naomi Carter stood near the edge of the terrace overlooking the skyline in a fitted black velvet gown that shimmered subtly beneath the city lights. Her dark curls rested elegantly against one shoulder, while silver earrings caught the glow of Manhattan beneath her. There was no desperation left in her anymore. No need to prove survival. She looked like peace disguised as power. Across the rooftop, Ethan Whitmore watched her in silence for nearly 10 minutes before finally gathering the courage to approach. The past few months had stripped something from him. Arrogance, perhaps, or illusion. Whitmore Global continued losing major accounts, while Victoria Hale's frustration grew increasingly public and impossible to ignore. The glamorous marriage that once seemed worth destroying everything for had become cold theater performed for magazines and cameras. Yet none of those losses haunted Ethan the way Naomi's absence did. He stopped beside her quietly near the terrace railing while the wind moved softly through the rooftop gardens around them. For several moments, neither spoke. The city stretched endlessly beneath them in rivers of gold and white light, while distant sirens echoed somewhere downtown. Finally, Ethan exhaled slowly. "You look happy." Naomi kept her eyes on the skyline. "I am peaceful," she corrected softly. "There is a difference." Ethan nodded faintly, as though the words hurt more because they were true. He looked older now. Not physically, spiritually. Like a man who had spent too long chasing admiration only to discover applause disappears quickly in empty rooms. "I spent months trying to understand how everything collapsed so fast," he admitted quietly. Naomi turned toward him slightly. "It did not collapse fast, Ethan. It collapsed slowly. You just stopped paying attention." The honesty in her voice carried no cruelty. Somehow that made it worse. Ethan rested both hands against the terrace railing while wind tugged gently at his tuxedo jacket. "Victoria and I barely speak anymore," he confessed. "Every conversation feels like a business deal." Naomi said nothing. Below them, traffic moved endlessly through Manhattan, while the jazz music drifted softly behind them like memories refusing to leave. Ethan stared out at the skyline before speaking again, his voice lower this time. "Do you know what I miss the most?" Naomi remained still beside him. "Peace," he answered himself before she could reply. "I miss coming home and not needing to prove anything." That finally made her look at him fully. For the first time in years, Ethan Whitmore looked less like a billionaire and more like the exhausted young man she once met on a rooftop in Brooklyn, carrying impossible dreams and cheap coffee. "I traded peace for vanity," he said quietly. The confession disappeared into the night air between them. Naomi studied him for several silent seconds before answering. "And I traded pain for freedom." Ethan lowered his gaze immediately. Somewhere behind them, cameras flashed near the ballroom entrance while wealthy strangers laughed beneath crystal lights, completely unaware that one quiet conversation near the rooftop edge carried more truth than the entire gala combined. "Do you hate me?" he asked eventually. Naomi looked back toward the skyline again. "No," she answered softly. "I think hating someone means they still control part of your heart." Ethan closed his eyes briefly at that. The wind moved around them once more, carrying traces of autumn through the rooftop gardens, while Manhattan glittered endlessly below like a city built from beautiful mistakes. After a long silence, Ethan finally turned toward her again. "If I could go back," he began quietly, "I would choose differently." Naomi's expression softened then, not with longing, but with understanding. "That is the tragedy of betrayal, Ethan," she said gently. "By the time people realize what mattered most, they have usually already destroyed it." Then she stepped away from the railing and walked calmly back toward the golden ballroom lights, without looking behind her once. And for the second time in his life, Ethan Whitmore watched Naomi Carter disappear into a crowd, knowing there was absolutely nothing left he could offer that she still needed. Winter returned to Manhattan exactly 1 year after Naomi Carter watched her marriage shatter beneath cathedral photographs and cold headlines. Snow drifted softly across the Hudson River, while the city glowed beneath thousands of holiday lights reflected against black water and glass towers. But this year, the skyline looked different to Naomi. Not because the city had changed, because she had. A private yacht moved slowly along the river that evening, its polished deck glowing beneath warm gold lanterns while soft jazz drifted through the winter air. Inside, leaders from nonprofit foundations, female entrepreneurs, and young scholarship recipients gathered for the annual Carter Foundation Winter Gala, an organization Naomi quietly built over the past year to support women rebuilding their lives after financial and emotional hardship. There were no screaming headlines attached to the event. No scandal. No revenge spectacle. Just quiet purpose. Naomi stood near the edge of the upper deck wrapped in a long ivory coat over a silver evening gown while snowflakes melted softly against her curls. The cold air carried peace instead of loneliness now. Behind her, guests laughed gently beneath crystal lighting while young women she had mentored spoke about new businesses, scholarships, and second chances. Naomi listened to them, with soft pride warming her expression. Somewhere along the way, the woman who once measured her value through marriage had become someone capable of creating light for other people. Across the river, construction cranes rose against the skyline where the old Whitmore estate once stood. The mansion had been demolished months earlier to make room for an ultra-luxury hotel development. Naomi watched the distant lights carefully as memories flickered through her mind one final time. The grand staircase, the piano room, anniversary candles burning beside untouched champagne. For years she believed losing that home would destroy her. Now she understood something unexpected. Sometimes God removes places from our lives because we were never meant to stay trapped inside who we used to be. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Carter." Naomi turned gently. One of the scholarship students stood nearby holding a navy cashmere scarf against the cold. Barely 20 years old, nervous and bright-eyed. "I just wanted to thank you," the young woman said quietly. "You changed my life this year." Naomi smiled warmly before adjusting the scarf around the girl's shoulders herself. "No," she answered softly. "You changed your own life. I only reminded you that you deserved better." The young woman's eyes filled briefly with emotion before she nodded and returned toward the warmth of the gala inside. Naomi remained near the railing afterward, watching snow fall silently over Manhattan. Her phone vibrated once inside her coat pocket. A message from Ethan Whitmore. Simple, uncharacteristically honest. "I hope you are happy, Naomi." She stared at the screen for several seconds while winter wind moved gently across the river around her. Then she typed only one sentence in return. "I finally learned peace does not come from being loved correctly by others. It comes from never abandoning yourself again." She pressed send before slipping the phone back into her pocket. Somewhere downtown, Ethan Whitmore sat alone inside a quiet penthouse staring at city lights and old regrets that no amount of money could repair. Victoria Hale had left months earlier after Whitmore Global sold nearly half its assets to survive mounting debt and collapsing investor confidence. The empire still existed, but smaller now, quieter, like a kingdom finally discovering the cost of vanity. And yet Naomi felt no satisfaction imagining his loneliness. Revenge had stopped mattering a long time ago, because in the end, this story was never truly about Ethan losing a mansion. It was about Naomi Carter refusing to lose herself. The yacht continued gliding across dark winter water beneath the glittering skyline, while jazz music floated softly into the night. Naomi closed her eyes briefly, breathing in the cold December air as snow settled against the city around her like forgiveness. Then she smiled quietly toward the future waiting ahead of her. Not broken, not bitter, reborn.